What does it really mean to be smart? Is it a high IQ, a shelf full of degrees, or is it something quieter, harder to measure, yet unmistakable when you see it? In real life, the smartest person in the room is rarely the one who speaks the most or shows off their resume. It is the one who sees patterns others miss, who remains calm when others panic, who plays the long game while others chase the quick win. Sometimes they speak last, sometimes not at all. But their decisions are sharp. Their presence is steady. Their thinking is multidimensional. They move like a strategist, not just in business, but in relationships, in conflict, in life itself. Today, we are going to uncover 15 subtle signs that reveal the kind of intelligence no test can measure, but every wise person respects. As we move through them, reflect on where you stand and what you might still be cultivating. This is not about comparison, it is about clarity. If you value self-mastery over performance and insight over noise, you are exactly where you need to be. Let's begin. 1. Masterful listening and engagement. You want to know who truly outsmarts everyone in the room. It's not the one who talks the loudest or dominates the conversation with a flood of facts and figures. It's the one who sits quietly, absorbing everything like a sponge, letting silence do the heavy lifting and speaking only when their words will shift the energy of the room. This is not about being passive. This is about power in stillness and clarity in restraint. It is the person who has mastered the ancient and underrated art of listening, not just with the ears, but with the whole presence. When you listen with intention, you don't just hear what is being said, you hear what is not being said. You pick up on tone, on hesitation, on contradiction. You begin to see the person speaking more clearly than they see themselves. And when you do speak, your words carry weight, because they are not rushed. They are deliberate. They emerge from stillness, and people feel that. Most people respond impulsively, as if every conversation is a tennis match where the point is to return every serve. But the one who outsmarts everyone else plays a different game. They understand that silence, too, is a move. Picture yourself in a crowded boardroom or around a dinner table. Tensions are high. Everyone's trying to assert dominance through volume and speed. Then there's you, calm, observant, unbothered by the pressure to be heard. You nod thoughtfully. You ask one or two clarifying questions that stop others in their tracks. And when you finally speak, everyone listens. Not because you've raised your voice, but because you've raised your presence. You've paid attention, and that makes your insight land with precision. This is not manipulation. This is mastery. And the Stoics knew it well. Epictetus once said, "We have 2 ears and 1 mouth so that we can listen twice as much as we speak." It wasn't just advice for better conversations. It was a blueprint for power. Because when you listen deeply, you gather information others overlook. You remember names, details, and patterns that seem trivial to others, but become tools for influence in your hands. You recall the name of someone's child. You reference a goal they once mentioned. And suddenly, you are not just respected, you are trusted. Trust is built in those quiet moments when someone feels heard, seen, and remembered. And you become the kind of person others open up to. Because you're not just waiting for your turn to speak. You're paying attention to what they value, to what they fear, to what drives them. And in doing so, you gain a kind of invisible leverage. You know what motivates them. You know what they need. And that gives you the upper hand without ever having to raise your voice. But there's more to this kind of listening than just strategy. It cultivates patience. It teaches humility. It puts your ego in check because it reminds you that your thoughts are not always the most important ones in the room. And in a world obsessed with shouting opinions, that kind of restraint is radical, that kind of patience is rare, and that rarity is what makes it so powerful. Let's be honest. Most people can't wait to talk. They interrupt, they assume, they offer solutions to questions that were never asked. But you You ask the question behind the question. You notice the shift in energy when someone's posture changes. You sense discomfort, curiosity, excitement, and you mirror it back to them in a way that makes them feel understood. And when people feel understood, they become open, they become influenced. And that is how you utter the world, not by overpowering it, but by understanding it better than it understands itself. Think about someone in your life who is known for their presence, someone who rarely speaks, but when they do, everyone stops to listen. They are not loud, they are not theatrical, but their words cut through the noise. Why? Because they are rooted in awareness, because they have trained themselves to hear what others miss. That is not a gift, that is a practice, one you can begin today. So the next time you're in a conversation, pause. Listen not just to what is said, but to why it's being said. Is there fear behind the words? Is there insecurity disguised as confidence? Is there a cry for validation buried beneath a boast? Notice everything. Take mental notes. And when you respond, do so with the weight of someone who has taken the time to understand. Ask better questions, not to impress, but to reveal. Because the right question will always unlock more truth than 1,000 clever answers. And the person who asks it will always be remembered. This is what the Stoics knew, that wisdom is not in having the final word, but in knowing when to speak and when to remain still. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, often wrote about restraint in his private meditations, not because he was unsure, but because he knew the power of choosing words with care. He knew that the loudest person is rarely the wisest, and in that silence he found his strength. So let this be your reminder. Masterful engagement is not about dominating a room. It's about commanding it through quiet clarity, through patience, through genuine presence. That is how you outsmart the world, not by rushing to be seen, but by mastering the art of seeing others first. At the end of the day, the person who listens deeply, remembers quietly, and speaks wisely, that is the person who truly owns the room. That is the person who leaves an impression that cannot be erased. And that person can be you. Master this, and people won't just listen. They'll remember. 2. Clear and relatable communication. There is a quiet genius in those who speak plainly. In a world intoxicated with complexity, where some use convoluted words to impress and others hide behind jargon to disguise their ignorance, the one who explains a difficult idea so clearly that a child could understand it is often the most brilliant person in the room. This is not about dumbing things down. This is about sharpening your understanding to the point that your words become like clear glass. Nothing distorts, nothing distracts. Just the truth, delivered with intention. Those who outsmart everyone else do not need to sound smart. They are not performing for approval. They are not speaking to be admired. They speak to be understood. Because true intelligence, as the Stoics believed, is not just about what you know, it is about what you can transmit. Can you take something profound, something dense with theory and structure, and make it feel like common sense? Can you strip away the unnecessary, get to the essence, and place it gently in the mind of another without overwhelming them? That is the art of communication, and it is a sign of deep wisdom. Seneca once said that a wise man speaks not to show off his learning, but to help others see more clearly. That is the Stoic way. Clarity is not just a skill, it is a virtue. Because when you speak with clarity, you honor the mind of the listener. You say, I respect your time, I value your attention. I want you to walk away with something real, not just be dazzled by words. Imagine this. You're in a room with experts. Some speak with pride, flaunting technical terms and obscure references. Then you rise. You take the same idea and explain it in a way that feels grounded, human, and clear. You use a metaphor, a personal story, something universal. And as you speak, heads nod, eyes soften, people begin to understand not just the concept, but the heart of it. That is when respect shifts. That is when others realize you are not just knowledgeable, you are wise. A philosopher may explain the nature of time with complex cosmology. A child might ask, "Why does the day feel short when I'm happy and long when I'm sad?" And the truly wise person can answer both with the same clarity. You can explain to a 5-year-old and to a scholar, not because you simplify the idea, but because you see it so clearly that your words become water, fitting the shape of whoever listens. This kind of communication takes empathy. You must care about the person on the other end of the conversation. You must observe their language, their references, their worldview. You must speak in a way that meets them where they are and gently guides them toward where they could go. That is not manipulation. That is service. And it requires that you drop the ego and tune in to something higher: connection, understanding, purpose. Stoicism teaches that words are tools. They are to be used with care, like a surgeon uses a scalpel, like a craftsman uses a chisel. The goal is not to impress with the tool. The goal is to create something that endures, something that serves. Every time you speak, you are shaping perception. And if your words are rooted in clarity, compassion, and understanding, then what you shape is trust. And trust is the foundation of all influence. The great communicator knows when to pause, when to slow down, when to reframe. They do not speak to fill silence. They speak to deliver meaning, and they use stories not just to entertain, but to illuminate. A personal story, shared at the right moment, creates a bridge between your experience and the listener's reality. It makes ideas memorable. It makes lessons live. I once met a teacher who could explain Einstein's theory of relativity using nothing more than a train, a flashlight, and a few well-chosen words. He didn't have the title of professor, he didn't wear a suit, but in 5 minutes he made more people understand that concept than any textbook ever could. Why? Because he cared about being understood more than sounding brilliant, because he believed that wisdom loses nothing by being accessible, and that belief made him powerful. So ask yourself, how do you speak? Do you communicate to be heard or to be understood? Do you use stories and metaphors to help others see, or do you hide behind complexity to protect your image? Do you speak to elevate others or to elevate yourself? Marcus Aurelius once reminded himself in his private notes, "Be simple and direct." Not because the world is simple, but because simplicity is the sign of mastery. You do not need to perform. You do not need to impress. You need only to connect. That is the power of clear, relatable communication. It is the quiet superpower of those who truly outsmart the world, not by talking the most, but by saying the most with the fewest words. At the end of the day, communication is not a display of knowledge. It is an act of generosity. You take what you know, what you've learned through struggle and reflection, and you offer it to another in the most digestible human form possible. That is how you lead minds. That is how you shift hearts. That is how you leave a legacy not just of knowledge, but of understanding. So speak simply. Speak clearly. Speak in a way that honors the mind and heart of the person listening, because when you do, you don't just sound smart. You make others feel smart. And that is the mark of someone who has not only outsmarted the world, but elevated it. Let your clarity be your strength. Let your words be a reflection of your empathy. And let your presence in any conversation be a reminder that brilliance does not shout. It speaks with calm, with precision, and with purpose. 3. Strategic observation of details. It is often said that wisdom begins with the ability to see what others overlook. While the world moves fast, racing toward the loudest voice and the brightest spotlight, those who outsmart everyone else are not found chasing attention. They are observing, quietly, constantly, with purpose. And what they notice is not always the grand gesture or the headline. It is the subtle detail, the shift in tone, the glance that lingers too long, the objects arranged on a desk, the worn-out corner of a book, the cadence of someone's speech, or the moment they hesitate before answering. These are not just scraps of information. They are clues, and the one who sees them is already 2 steps ahead. The Stoics understood the power of perception. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to observe without judgment, to see the essence of things, not the appearance, not the noise, but the truth beneath. This ability is not merely a matter of intellect. It is a matter of discipline, because observation requires restraint. You cannot observe while speaking. You cannot notice the truth if you are too busy projecting an image. True observers are listeners first, watchers second. Only then, when they have gathered enough from the world around them, do they speak. And when they do, it lands with the force of someone who knows more than they say. Picture this. You walk into a room, you take a moment before speaking, you look, you notice the way someone holds their cup, the books on their shelf, the slight wear on their shoes that tells you they walk more than they drive. You note the kind of laughter that comes from one person, full and open, and the restrained smile of another. These are not just random impressions. They are data. And while others rush to make a point, you are quietly building an understanding. There is power in seeing what others miss, not to manipulate, but to connect. You're not using your perception to control others. You're using it to align, because the moment someone feels seen, truly seen, they open up, they trust, they feel safe. And trust, once established, creates space for influence. This is not dark psychology. This is what happens when presence meets empathy. You might notice that a person wears a watch that belonged to their grandfather. You ask about it. Their eyes soften. They tell you a story. Suddenly, you're not just a stranger. You're someone who saw something meaningful. Or perhaps in a conversation, someone mentions something in passing, a childhood hobby, a place they once lived. Most would move on, but you return to it later. And in doing so, you show them that their words mattered, that you were present, that you listened, that you remembered. People remember those who remember them, not just in the big moments, but in the smallest ones. A comment, a glance, a preference. These details are the threads of human connection, and the more of them you notice, the more capable you become of weaving trust, rapport, and deeper understanding. The Stoics would call this harmonizing with nature, with human nature, with reality as it is, not as we assume it to be. The art of strategic observation is not only about the external world, it is also deeply internal. It requires that you slow down, that you train yourself to notice without needing to react, that you cultivate patience. It demands that you quiet your own ego enough to actually care about what someone else is saying or doing. Most people don't do this. Most are simply waiting to speak. But you are watching, you are understanding, and that makes you different. This form of awareness sharpens your presence in any room. It gives you an edge that doesn't scream for attention, but earns respect silently. Because when people realize you are the kind of person who notices what they didn't even realize they were showing, they pay closer attention to you. They measure their words more carefully around you. They respect the quiet strength of someone who sees clearly and speaks sparingly. And in this clarity, you become adaptable, flexible, without losing yourself. You can walk into any space and find the common thread. Whether you're with artists, engineers, parents, CEOs, or teenagers, you look for the bridge. You find the language that resonates because you've already noticed what matters to them. You've seen their interests, their values, their signals, and you speak to those, not with scripts, but with sensitivity, not with tactics, but with truth. There is nothing artificial in this ability. It is born from attention and humility. You do not assume. You learn. You do not pretend. You perceive. And by doing so, you begin to mirror others in a way that does not mimic them, but honors their perspective. You find the overlap, the place where your world touches theirs. And in that space, trust grows. I remember once sitting across from someone who barely said a word during a meeting. Everyone else was caught up in their own performance, but I noticed the way he tapped his fingers when the discussion turned to a particular topic. I mentioned it quietly afterward. He looked at me and said, "You're the first person who asked about that." It turned into a 30-minute conversation that opened doors no presentation ever could, all because I paid attention. This is what the world needs more of. People who observe with care, people who remember the names others forget, people who notice the silent stress in a friend's eyes, people who track the patterns, see the gaps, and use what they see not to manipulate, but to serve, to lead, to guide. In the same way, a great designer sees the small curve of a chair leg and understands its relationship to the whole. You see the smallest part of a person and recognize its meaning within the full complexity of who they are. Charles Eames once said, "The details are not the details. They make the design." And so it is with people. The way someone sighs when they walk into a room, the objects they choose to surround themselves with, the rhythm of their speech. These are not throwaway signals. They are the fingerprints of identity. And if you learn to see them, you learn to see people. So become the kind of person who watches closely, who listens beyond the words, who remembers what others forget. Not to gain power over people, but to deepen your humanity, to see with precision, to speak with purpose, and to lead with presence. That is what it means to outsmart the world. You do not have to raise your voice, you only have to raise your awareness. At the end of the day, the person who sees most clearly wins, not because they dominate others, but because they understand them, and in that understanding lies the true essence of influence. The Stoics taught us that perception is everything, so train your perception. Cultivate your ability to notice the truth hidden in plain sight, and let the world wonder how you always seem to know what others miss. This is your quiet strength. This is your unseen advantage. Use it wisely. Let it guide your words, your decisions, your path, because in the details you do not just find people, you find yourself. 4. Preparation for control. There is a kind of quiet power that belongs only to the prepared. It is the strength that doesn't shake the room with noise, but settles into it with calm confidence. When you are prepared, you do not need to force your presence. You do not need to prove anything. The room adjusts to you. The energy bends toward your stillness. The reason is simple. You've already been there. Not physically, perhaps, but mentally, emotionally, strategically. You have rehearsed the terrain. You've seen the questions before they're asked. You've walked through the possibilities. You've anticipated the objections, the hesitations, the shifts in tone. And when the moment comes, you are not flustered. You are ready. This is one of the greatest advantages you can create for yourself in life. The art of internal simulation. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. Imagine the event before it happens. Imagine the emotions that may arise. Prepare your response. It is not paranoia. It is mental conditioning. It is armor that does not weigh you down, but frees you to move with clarity. Before you walk into a meeting, you already know who will challenge your idea. You know who will sit silently, waiting to be impressed. You know what concerns they'll raise and what unspoken doubts might be hidden beneath polite words. And because you've thought about all of this, your answers feel natural, unforced, seamless. It's not about memorization, it's about understanding the rhythm of the room before the first word is spoken. There is a myth in society that the most brilliant people improvise everything, that true intelligence means you can wing it, that you can show up and figure it out on the spot. But anyone who has truly mastered their craft knows this is nonsense. The pianist who moves effortlessly across the keys has practiced for years. The speaker who captures a room with 3 sentences has crafted those words with care. The general who wins the battle has walked that battlefield in his mind 100 times before his soldiers ever step foot on it. Preparation does not limit you, it liberates you. It allows you to be present because your mind is no longer scrambling in panic. It is grounded in foresight. The Stoics believed that the key to a tranquil mind was anticipation. Not fear-driven overthinking, but calm, measured foresight. You do not fear surprises because you have removed their teeth. You have visualized not just success, but resistance, confusion, delay, skepticism, and by doing so, you have made peace with them. They no longer shake you. Think about a job interview. Most people prepare for it by scanning a few sample questions, rehearsing their resume in their heads, maybe checking the company's website. But someone who truly outsmarts the process will go further. They will imagine the energy of the room, the tempo of the conversation, the slight shift in the interviewer's expression when something sparks their curiosity, the moment when silence fills the space after a difficult question. They don't just answer the question, they speak to the fear behind the question. They speak to the unsaid. This level of preparation feels almost like intuition to outsiders. They say, "How did you know they would ask that? How did you handle that curveball so smoothly?" But it was not luck. It was vision. It was mental discipline. It was the Stoic strategy of thinking before acting, observing before speaking, planning before moving. And that is how control is quietly taken, not by dominating the space, but by entering it already attuned to its rhythm. Preparation is not about perfection. It's about readiness. Readiness to adapt. Readiness to respond. Readiness to lead. It's about having a plan and the presence of mind to let go of that plan if needed without losing your balance. Because when you are prepared, you are not married to a single path. You are aware of the terrain, you know the exits, you know the pivots, and because of that, you remain calm while others scramble. There is a story about a Stoic commander who once led his men into an ambush. The soldiers panicked, but he remained calm. Why? Because he had already considered the possibility. In his mind, he had already faced defeat, already suffered setback, already seen the chaos. And in seeing it, he robbed it of its power. He didn't need to react. He had already rehearsed his response. This is what separates the wise from the unprepared. The unprepared are ruled by the moment. They are at the mercy of emotion, uncertainty, circumstance. The prepared, on the other hand, remain sovereign over themselves. They do not fear the unknown. They have faced it in thought, which means they can face it in action. Let this be your quiet advantage. Prepare, not because you are afraid, but because you respect the complexity of life. Prepare not to impress others, but to reduce unnecessary friction. Prepare not so you can control everything, but so that you remain unshaken when you cannot. Because preparation is not about rigid plans, it is about internal clarity. And when your inner world is ordered, the outer world loses its grip on you. When people walk away from a conversation with you, they feel something different. They may not be able to explain it, but they feel it. The precision, the calm, the subtle confidence. They trust your words, not because you shouted them, but because you delivered them with the steady presence of someone who had already lived through the moment in their mind. You become the kind of person others rely on. In crisis, they look to you. In planning, they trust your insight. Because you're not guessing, you're not hoping, you're moving with purpose. And that purpose was forged in the hours no one saw, the hours of quiet preparation, the mental rehearsal, the reflection, the foresight. This is how you gain control, not by manipulation, not by aggression, but by foresight, by being 3 moves ahead, by understanding that in every situation, the person who has prepared the most holds the invisible advantage, and that advantage, when guided by stoic clarity, becomes a force of stability in a world of chaos. So the next time you walk into a room, remember, you've already been there. You've already seen the questions, the challenges, the energy, and because of that, you are not rattled. You are ready. Ready to listen, ready to respond, ready to lead. Preparation is not a burden. It is a gift you give yourself, a promise that no matter what the world brings, you have already begun mastering the moment. And at the end of the day, the person who prepares is not just controlling the narrative, they are controlling their own mind. And that, the Stoics would say, is the only victory that truly matters. 5. Guarded privacy for power. There is a rare kind of strength that does not speak. It does not broadcast. It does not overshare. It simply moves in silence. In a world addicted to exposure, to validation, to digital confessions for likes and applause, the one who guards their privacy stands out like a shadow that cannot be traced. You may not see them coming, but when they act, you know it was intentional. This is not about secrecy for the sake of mystery. This is about sovereignty. This is about controlling your narrative by choosing not to give it away. You outsmart the room not because you speak the most, but because you reveal the least. Others walk in and lay everything bare, hoping that transparency will earn them connection. But you understand something deeper. You know that information is power, not in the cold, manipulative sense, but in the deeply philosophical sense, because every detail you release is a piece of your strategy, and strategy, when seen too early, loses its edge. The Stoics believed in measured speech. Seneca wrote that one should speak only when it improves upon silence. What happens when you live that principle? You become harder to read, harder to predict, harder to influence. And in a world where everyone is mapping each other's weaknesses through words and confessions, being unreadable becomes a form of armor. It is not about being closed off. It is about being intentional. Not every truth needs a platform. Not every thought deserves to be posted. Not every feeling must be shared. You know this, which is why you do not explain your relationships to strangers. You do not feel the need to justify your success, your movements, your choices. You let your work speak. You let your discipline speak. You let your presence speak. And the silence around you becomes louder than any noise others could make. In conversation, you listen more than you speak. You let others fill the space with their stories, their opinions, their beliefs. You ask questions, not to manipulate, but to understand. And when the conversation ends, they feel seen, heard, while you walk away with insights they never even realized they gave you. Meanwhile, they know only fragments about you, nothing complete, nothing certain. And that imbalance, that asymmetry, gives you leverage. You do not dominate through force. You simply keep the advantage of knowing more than you reveal. In the digital world, this mindset becomes even more critical. The moment you post a picture, a location, a thought, you offer the world a piece of yourself. And while others treat their online life like an open diary, you understand that the more visible your path becomes, the easier it is to influence, disrupt, or derail. So you remain watchful. Your online presence is minimal, not because you are hiding, but because you are protecting. You do not allow platforms to turn you into the product. You use them as tools, not stages. Your digital footprint is not scattered carelessly across the internet. It is guarded, tracked, controlled. Because you understand that privacy is not paranoia. It is clarity. It is peace. It is the refusal to trade your autonomy for fleeting attention. You are not seduced by the spotlight. You are focused on your mission, and your mission requires that you move without interference. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Be like the rock that the waves keep crashing over. It stands unmoved, and the raging of the sea falls still around it." That is what privacy gives you. It makes you immovable in a world of noise. While others are swept by opinion, distraction, and digital drama, you stand still, because no one knows where you are vulnerable. No one knows where to aim. You are a moving force without a visible target. Think of the most powerful people you've known. They do not walk into rooms declaring their wealth, their plans, their relationships. They let others speak, speculate, assume. They conserve energy, they observe, and then they act. Quietly, precisely, powerfully. You emulate that, not to copy them, but because the principles are eternal. Discretion is strength, stillness is strategy, privacy is power. In your personal life, you apply the same discipline. You do not need to prove that you are in love. You do not need to show your audience every dinner, every vacation, every romantic gesture. Because what is real does not require performance. What is valuable is protected. Not hidden out of shame, but guarded out of respect. For yourself, for your values, for the people closest to you. In professional settings, your restraint builds reputation. While others oversell and overpromise, you understate and overdeliver. And when people speak of you, they use words like dependable, focused, grounded. Why? Because you do not dilute your energy by broadcasting every plan, every pivot, every accomplishment. You let your actions create the narrative, and that is why people trust you. You are not in a rush to be understood. You are in pursuit of something greater than recognition. In a society obsessed with access, you become rare by limiting access. Not out of arrogance, but out of principle. Because you know that the fewer people who know your plans, the harder they are to interrupt. You know that when your goals are spoken too soon, they lose their sacredness. You know that clarity requires boundaries, and those boundaries start with silence. So keep your circle tight, keep your process private, keep your goals sacred. Move with intention, not for applause. Let people wonder how you always seem so composed. Let them guess what you are working on. Let them assume, speculate, doubt. Their curiosity is your camouflage. Their noise is your silence. And when the time comes to speak, speak with precision. When the time comes to act, act with confidence. But until then, let your restraint be your strength. Let your privacy be your fortress. Let your silence be the language of your wisdom. At the end of the day, the person who outsmarts the room is not always the loudest. It is the one who sees everything, hears everything, understands everything, and reveals nothing until the moment calls for it. That person walks through life untouched by the chaos, rooted in discipline, armed with foresight, guided by inner clarity. That person is you. The one who does not need to be seen to move the world, the one who does not speak to be validated, the one who values what is sacred and protects what is theirs. That is not weakness, that is not distance, that is power, purified through discipline. So walk with intention, guard your peace. And remember, when you keep what matters most protected, you do not lose anything, you gain control. And control, in the Stoic life, is not about dominating others. It is about mastering yourself. That is where the real strength lives. And once you find it, no one can take it from you. 6. Influential opinion and trust. There comes a point in your journey when your words begin to carry weight, not because of your title, not because of force, but because of your track record. People lean in when you speak, not because they fear you, but because they trust you. Not because you are the loudest, but because you have proven time and time again that when you speak, clarity enters the room. that when you offer perspective, it shifts something fundamental in the way others see a problem. Your opinion becomes more than a suggestion. It becomes a compass. This is not something you earn overnight. It is built quietly through years of making difficult calls with calm, through consistently choosing reason over impulse, through cultivating a mind that thinks beyond emotion, ego, and short-term gain. And when people begin to notice that your predictions are rarely off the mark, that your intuition is matched by discernment, something subtle changes. You are no longer just another voice in the crowd. You become the voice that others measure their own against. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That is the essence of earned influence. You do not need to persuade others of your insight. You demonstrate it, you live it, and slowly others begin to realize that when things are uncertain, when tempers flare or situations feel murky, your presence brings stability. You do not speak for the sake of opinion. You speak because your thoughts have passed through the filters of experience, logic, and calm reflection. Imagine sitting at a round table, surrounded by decision-makers, executives, leaders. Tension fills the room. Opinions fly, strong and ungrounded. Then someone turns to you. "What do you think?" And the room quiets. Not because you demanded attention, but because everyone understands one thing. You have thought this through. You have observed what others missed. You have considered the ripple effects others ignored, and when you speak, you do so with precision, with balance, and it lands. People are not drawn to your opinion because it is flamboyant. They are drawn to it because it is reliable, because it holds the rare quality of being well judged. And in a world increasingly ruled by reaction and bias, the calm voice of reason is like water in a drought. Those in positions of power do not seek your voice because of hierarchy. They seek it because they know you see what they cannot. They trust you to find what is hidden, to weigh what is unseen, to say what must be said, even when it is uncomfortable. This trust is built not only through correctness, but through consistency. You do not shift with trends. You are not easily seduced by hype or drama. You are anchored. You have learned to separate signal from noise, and that makes you indispensable. In business, people consult you not just for facts, but for foresight. In relationships, people rely on your words to help them regain balance. In crisis, people lean into your silence, knowing that you are not frozen, but assessing. This kind of influence can feel strange at first. You may wonder why others defer to you, even when you hold no formal authority. But the truth is, authority is often hollow without wisdom. And wisdom, when paired with clarity and restraint, always finds its way to the center of the conversation. The Stoics did not seek power through titles. They sought mastery of thought. They sought the kind of character that naturally attracts respect. And that is what you have built. Some call it foresight, some call it intuition, others think you see into the future. But what you really have is clarity born from experience and deep observation. You have trained your mind to slow down in moments where others rush. You have studied cause and effect. You have made mistakes and learned from them. And now, when you speak, it comes not from arrogance, but from alignment. You speak because you see clearly, and that clarity has become your gift. Let me give you an example. I once knew a man who never spoke during the first half of any meeting. He would sit, quietly listening. Not disengaged, but alert, watching, measuring. While others threw out ideas, argued, postured, he stayed centered. Then, near the end, when the room had exhausted itself in noise, he would speak. Maybe 5 sentences. But those 5 sentences would reframe the problem, dissolve the ego, and point to the truth. Everyone remembered what he said. Not because it was loud, but because it was real. Because it was right. That is the mark of someone who outsmarts the room through presence, not performance. You do not need a badge to be respected. You do not need applause to be heard. All you need is a mind trained in discipline, a voice governed by truth, and a reputation forged by restraint. People will begin to see you not just as intelligent, but as wise. And in times of doubt, they will instinctively turn toward your steadiness. This is a responsibility, because people will begin to anchor their decisions to your words. And if your words are not grounded in principle, if they are swayed by ego or self-interest, you risk becoming a false compass. But if you remain true to your values, if you continue sharpening your judgment, refining your clarity, then your opinion will continue to move things. Not because you push, but because people trust that your words lead to peace, to results, to insight. Let your influence be earned, not asserted. Let it rise not from volume, but from clarity. And let every opinion you give be a gift of thoughtfulness, not a performance of intellect. People will come to you not for validation, but for guidance. Not because you always tell them what they want to hear, but because you say what must be heard. This is how you outsmart the world. Not with tricks, not with arrogance, but with reasoned thought expressed at the right moment. When others panic, you pause. When others assume, you ask. When others speak too soon, you wait. And when you do speak, your voice realigns the room. It invites trust. And trust once earned is a form of influence that no position or title can replicate. So continue cultivating your judgment. Sharpen your ability to see what others miss. Speak when it matters, and let your opinion not be loud, but luminous. Because when your words hold weight, you do not need to push to be heard. You simply speak, and the world listens. 7. Silent confidence without bragging. There is a confidence so refined, so grounded, that it never needs to announce itself. It does not enter the room loudly. It does not seek applause. It does not decorate itself with titles or cling to praise. It simply is. You feel it in the way someone walks, in how they listen more than they speak, in how they hold their gaze without needing to dominate. This is the confidence of the Stoic. A calm, unwavering sense of self that is built not on external validation, but on inner mastery. You do not need to prove your intelligence. You do not remind others of your achievements or your credentials. In fact, you have long since stopped thinking about how you compare to others. Because comparison is the domain of the insecure, those who are still unsure of their worth. Those who need the spotlight to remind themselves they are visible. But you have moved beyond that. You are not chasing recognition. You are chasing refinement. You no longer bring up your accomplishments in conversation because they are not your identity. They are simply byproducts of your discipline. You do not talk about your IQ, your scores, or your status, because none of those things define your worth. You do not need others to tell you that you are intelligent. You already know, and you have made peace with the fact that not everyone will see it, not everyone will acknowledge it, but the people who matter will feel it. And more importantly, you no longer need anyone to. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic emperors, ruled an empire but still reminded himself daily that power means nothing without virtue. He understood that strength must be quiet, or it risks becoming arrogance, that wisdom must be modest, or it loses its depth. In the same way, your quiet confidence is not indifference, it is control. It is the discipline of being at ease with who you are, without demanding others notice it. People notice anyway. That is the paradox. The less you try to impress, the more impressive you become. The less you talk about yourself, the more curious people become about you. The less you compete, the more others sense that you are already ahead. Not ahead in some social ranking, but ahead in peace, in presence, in self-respect. While others are building personas, you are refining your principles. While others seek to be heard, you seek to understand, and that makes you rare. The truly powerful do not need to be loud. Think of the moments in history when silence spoke louder than speeches. A single look, a calm refusal, a steady presence in the middle of chaos. These are the gestures of someone who has trained their ego to kneel before their values. Someone who no longer needs to remind the world of their worth because they are living it. Your confidence is rooted in your commitment to growth. You wake up every day not to prove something to the world, but to become a better version of yourself. You read, you train, you observe, not to outshine others, but to outgrow your past self. That is what Stoicism teaches, that the highest form of achievement is not what others say about you, but what you can say to yourself when no one is watching. You are not competing. And that, in itself, sets you apart. Because when you are no longer racing others, your pace becomes sustainable. Your direction becomes clear. You are no longer distracted by detours designed by someone else's ego. You are walking your own path. Quietly, steadily, purposefully. And yes, that authenticity is what makes you stand out. You are one of one, not because you say so, but because you show up as yourself in every room, every decision, every interaction. You are not trying to impress with borrowed ideas or forced charisma. You have curated a voice that is your own, a presence that is real, a way of being that reflects deep inner work. There is a story about a monk who was once asked why he never boasted about his spiritual progress. He smiled and said, "When the tree bears fruit, the branches bow. That is your posture now. Not arrogance, not false humility, but presence, deep presence. You are rooted. And, in being rooted, you have become the kind of person others look to for stability. Not because you ask them to, but because you are stable. And, in a world full of noise, that stillness commands more attention than shouting ever could. Let the world talk. Let others compare, compete, perform. You are not in that game. You are in the process of becoming, and every day you return to the same work, refining your character, honoring your principles, speaking less and listening more, not to hide, but to grow, not to shrink, but to center yourself. Your quiet confidence is a mirror for others. Some will feel comfort in your calm. Others will feel threatened by it. That is not your concern. You're not here to manage their perception. You're here to master your response. And in that, you become untouchable, not invincible, but untouchable in spirit, grounded in clarity, free from the addiction of needing to be praised. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, to defend, to declare your worth, pause. Let your life speak. Let your actions reflect your values. Let your silence hold its own space, because the strongest person in the room is rarely the one talking. It's the one who does not need to. At the end of the day, you do not need permission to be great. You only need discipline. You do not need applause to know you are growing. You only need truth. And you do not need to be loud to lead. You only need to be aligned with who you are becoming. That is the essence of silent confidence. That is the strength of the Stoic mind. And that is why you do not just outsmart others, you outlast them, quietly, authentically, unshakably. 8. Purposeful focus on goals. There is a rare kind of person who walks into a room already knowing why they are there. They do not speak just to be heard. They do not stay just to be seen, and they certainly do not drift with the tide of every social current. Their focus is deliberate. Their time is protected. Their mission is not up for negotiation. This person may not always be the loudest, but they are always the most centered. While others are distracted by status games, fleeting drama, and shiny opportunities that glitter but do not serve, this individual returns again and again to one question: what am I here to do? That is how you move, with purpose, with restraint, with vision. You are not here to entertain noise. You are here to execute. And you do it without needing applause, without getting caught up in validation or distraction. You are like the archer who draws the bow with care, blocks out the noise of the crowd, and releases only when the target aligns. You do not fire wildly, hoping something lands. You aim, and when you aim, you rarely miss. This kind of mental discipline is what separates the reactive from the strategic. You are strategic. You do not waste energy on conflict that does not serve your goals. You do not chase every invitation, every opportunity, every distraction that begs for your attention. You understand the difference between motion and progress. You understand that just because something is loud does not mean it is important. That just because someone is in authority does not mean they are aligned with your direction. And so, with stoic clarity, you stay rooted. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Concentrate every minute like a Roman, like a man on purpose. Do every act in your life as if it were your last." That kind of urgency is not about panic. It is about precision. It is the refusal to drift. It is the discipline of staying aligned with the purpose that brought you into the room in the first place. That is why others often underestimate you at first. They mistake your silence for passivity. They mistake your calm for lack of drive, until you start to move, and then it becomes undeniable that you are not here to play. You are here to progress. You have learned to read the room without losing yourself in it. You know when to challenge a flawed idea and when to keep your disagreement to yourself, because speaking would do more harm than good. This is not weakness. This is wisdom. The ego wants to prove a point. Purpose wants to win the war, and you have chosen purpose. You have learned the art of political silence. You do not crave conflict. But when necessary, you do not run from it either. You use it. With poise, with strategy, with clarity. Think of how often conversations spiral into irrelevance. How often people get emotionally hijacked by a side comment or a provocative statement. You do not. You let others get tangled in the weeds while you continue walking the path. If someone tries to derail the conversation, you gently but firmly bring it back. If someone tries to trigger your ego, you smile and say nothing, because you know what matters, and you do not sacrifice what matters for the momentary satisfaction of being right, being heard, or being praised. This mindset gives you a quiet kind of power. People begin to notice that you are not easily swayed, that you do not waste words, that you do not chase what does not matter, and they begin to listen more closely when you speak, because they realize that everything you do is done with intention. You do not enter rooms unless there is a purpose. You do not speak unless you have something meaningful to say. You do not leave unless you have advanced your mission in some way. That is why you stand out. Because in a world of distraction, your focus is like a blade. You treat time like a scarce resource. And it is. Every moment you give to something unimportant is a moment you can never get back. The Stoics knew this. Seneca wrote, "People are frugal in guarding their personal property but waste their time. That is the one thing it is right to be stingy with." And so you are stingy. Not with kindness, not with generosity, but with attention. Because attention is the gateway to your time, your energy, and your legacy. You do not need to impress everyone. You are here to impress only one standard, your own. Your own discipline, your own values, your own calling. You know when to sit back and observe. You know when to lean forward and lead. And you never confuse busyness with productivity. You are like the craftsman who does not hammer for the sake of motion, but who strikes only when the measurement is exact. That is why your impact feels sharp, direct, unmistakable. There is a story of a warrior who was known for ending battles before they began, not because he was the strongest, but because he knew exactly where to strike. That is your approach to life. You do not scatter your energy, you conserve it, you direct it, and you release it with accuracy. Your focus is not about control, it is about alignment. You align everything you do with the outcome you are committed to, and that is why you achieve more with less motion than most people do with constant hustle. So yes, you are more sniper than shotgun. You do not fire wildly, hoping something lands. You wait, you observe, you think, you move only when movement matters. And when you move, the effect is immediate, precise, transformational. You do not forget your mission just because the room gets noisy. You do not abandon your path just because a door opens that does not lead where you need to go. You are not seduced by every shiny opportunity. You are not moved by every invitation to deviate. You hold the line, not rigidly but firmly, not blindly but wisely, because you know that staying focused is not about being narrow. It is about being deep. And depth is what brings real change. So let others be everywhere at once. You stay where it counts. Let others try to be everything. You stay committed to being excellent at what truly matters to you. Let others chase validation. You chase alignment. And in doing so, you will move further in silence than most will in noise. At the end of the day, the one who stays focused outpaces the one who is merely busy. The one who returns to their purpose again and again, who filters every choice through it, who adjusts but never abandons, becomes unstoppable. And that is who you are becoming. Stay with your purpose. Return to it when you're tempted. Use it to guide your speech, your decisions, your presence. And when the day ends, let your progress be measured not by how much you did, but by how aligned it was with what truly matters. That is not just the mark of someone who is effective. That is the mark of someone who has outsmarted the chaos of the world and mastered the order within. 9. Humility in seeking answers. There is a quiet courage in the person who can look someone in the eye and say, "I don't know." It is not the absence of knowledge that defines weakness. It is the pretense of knowing when you do not, the false confidence that says more about fear than strength. But to admit you are still learning, to say there is more for you to uncover, that is not weakness. That is power. That is what separates the arrogant from the wise, the rigid mind from the expansive one, the ego driven from the growth-oriented. You are someone who has embraced this truth. You have no need to pretend, no interest in making something up to look clever, because the moment you stopped needing to be right all the time was the moment you became unstoppable. You shifted your identity away from being the one who always has the answer and became the one who is always in pursuit of a better one. And in doing so, you moved from a world of performance into a world of mastery. This is the Stoic way. Epictetus reminded us that it is impossible to begin to learn that which one thinks one already knows. The mind that believes it is complete is closed. But the mind that admits its limits opens itself to the infinite. You do not fear not knowing. You fear complacency. You fear the trap of ego that tells you learning is beneath you. You have seen how pride can cost someone their growth, their clarity, their next opportunity. And so you stay humble. Because humility is not smallness. It is space. The space required for new knowledge to land, to grow, to transform. Imagine you are in a meeting. A question is raised that no one has an answer to. Some respond with vague approximations. Others deflect or bluff. But you speak plainly. "I'm not sure yet, but I'll find out." You do not shrink as you say it. You are steady, calm, clear. And in that moment, you earn something more valuable than applause. You earn trust. Because those around you can feel that you are not building your reputation on illusion. You are building it on integrity. This humility also creates space for others to rise. When you say, "I don't know, but maybe you do," you give others a chance to contribute, to shine, to feel useful. And in doing so, you build relationships not on dominance, but on mutual respect. That alone makes you a different kind of leader. Not one who needs to always be in front, but one who knows when to listen, when to learn, and when to let others lead. Your mindset is that of the eternal student. You understand that the more you grow, the more aware you become of what you have yet to learn, and that realization excites you. It keeps you sharp. It keeps your curiosity alive. While others chase the illusion of having arrived, you stay in motion, not running, not scrambling, but walking with intention toward deeper understanding. Think of the greatest minds in history. The ones who shaped disciplines, shifted paradigms, revolutionized thought. They did not speak as if they knew everything. They questioned, they tested, they experimented. They let the world teach them, and because of that, they changed it. You are cut from that same cloth. Not because of your current knowledge, but because of your commitment to continual learning. And yes, this mindset has a compounding effect. The more you ask questions, the sharper your thinking becomes. The more you seek input, the more nuanced your perspective grows. The more you are willing to learn, the more you see what others cannot. You connect ideas that others miss. You understand principles that others skim past. And you apply them with clarity, not because you pretended to know all along, but because you took the time to truly learn. There is an elegance in this path. A kind of grace that comes from no longer performing intelligence, but actually embodying it. And it begins every time you say, "I don't know yet." That single word "yet" carries enormous power. It signals that you are in motion, that you are not static, that you are becoming. And that identity, the identity of someone becoming more, is stronger than the identity of someone who insists they already are. You've also realized something else, that admitting what you don't know protects your time and energy. When you pretend to understand, you move forward based on illusion. You make decisions rooted in weakness. But when you pause, when you ask, when you seek out the real answer, you move with strength. You avoid unnecessary failure. You become more precise, and that precision leads to progress. Quiet, steady, meaningful progress. Others may think you are uncertain when you ask questions, but in truth, it takes more confidence to ask than to pretend. To admit ignorance requires self-respect. It requires you to be anchored in something deeper than image. And you are. You are anchored in your principles, in your mission, in your commitment to truth. And that is why you continue to evolve while others plateau. Let this be your reminder. The person who outsmarts the room is not the one with the fastest answer. It is the one who pauses, reflects, asks better questions, admits when they are unsure, seeks out the truth without shame, and once they find it, integrates it fully. So stay humble. Not the kind of humility that hides, but the kind that listens. Not the kind that apologizes for its presence, but the kind that refuses to pretend. Let others perform. Let others speak louder. You speak more clearly. Let others try to appear wise. You remain genuinely curious. Because at the end of the day, the person who can say, "I don't know," with calm and dignity, is the person who will one day know more than anyone else in the room. And the best part? You don't do it to be better than others. You do it because you refuse to stop growing. Because you know that knowledge is not a possession, it is a practice, and you are committed to that practice for life. That is what makes you powerful. That is what makes you free. That is why you will always keep rising. 10. Consistent routine for growth. Success is not an accident. Wisdom is not a gift. Clarity, strength, discipline, they do not appear out of nowhere. They are built, slowly, silently, day by day. And those who outsmart everyone else in the long run are not the ones who wait for motivation or chase random inspiration. They are the ones who build routines so grounded in purpose that they no longer need to think about whether they are improving. They simply are. Your growth is not something you leave to chance. It is designed into the structure of your day. From the moment you wake, you step into rhythm. Your first actions are not reactive. They are intentional. You do not check your phone for chaos. You check in with yourself, with your mission, with your mind. And that single choice, to begin the day on your terms, changes everything. You move your body, not for aesthetics, not for comparison, but for discipline, for energy, for the sense of mastery that comes when you tell your body what to do and it listens. That physical engagement is not just about strength, it is about control, it is about beginning the day with a win. And as you hydrate, as you brew your coffee or tea, you do not waste that quiet time. You use it. You feed your mind as you nourish your body. While the world is still waking up, you are already in motion, already learning, already elevating. You listen to something that stretches you, something that forces you to think beyond what you knew yesterday. It could be philosophy, it could be strategic thinking, it could be a case study on leadership or mental clarity. But the key is this: you feed your mind with intention, not with noise, not with gossip, not with distraction, but with wisdom, because you understand what most never grasp. That what you feed your mind becomes the lens through which you make every decision throughout the day. Top performers know this. They protect their mornings like sacred ground, not because they are trying to look productive, but because they know that the first 90 minutes of the day set the tone for everything that follows. And you have adopted that mindset. Whether or not you have a coach, whether or not you sit on a board or lead a team, you lead yourself. That is the highest form of leadership. Self-governance, self-discipline, self-mastery. And this consistency is what gives you your edge. Others wake up and stumble into their day. You wake up and step into it like a strategist entering battle. You know what matters. You know what you are working toward. And your routine reflects that clarity. You are not rigid. You are intentional. Your schedule does not suffocate you, it sharpens you, and over time, that sharpness becomes undeniable. There is a kind of peace that comes from living this way, a quiet satisfaction that builds when you no longer have to ask yourself if you are growing, because you can feel it, in your thoughts, in your decisions, in the way you respond to challenge, in the way you speak with precision and act with calm. That confidence is not loud, it is not boastful, it is the confidence that comes from consistency. And yes, the routine is simple. Wake with purpose, move your body, feed your mind, set your intention, execute with focus, reflect before rest. This is not complexity, it is clarity. And in a world that overwhelms itself with endless hacks and frantic optimization, your simplicity becomes your advantage. You do not chase perfection, you chase rhythm, you chase alignment. And that rhythm, once established, becomes your internal compass. Others look at you and wonder how you stay so composed, how you always seem a step ahead, how you recover from setbacks with speed and grace. But they do not see the pattern beneath it, the decisions repeated daily, the hours no one claps for, the learning that happens while others scroll, the training that happens while others snooze the alarm. They see the outcomes. You know the process. And here is the truth. The process is where the power lives. The Stoics understood this deeply. Epictetus taught that progress is made by those who focus on what they can control and apply effort to it every single day. Seneca wrote that the man who does not know what port he is sailing toward will never find a favorable wind. Your routine is your compass. It keeps you pointed toward that port. It keeps your energy from scattering, your mind from drifting, your purpose from dimming. You do not wait for perfect conditions. You work with what you have. And in doing so, you create momentum. You create results. You create transformation, and you do it not in grand gestures, but in the quiet repetition of the right habits, lived consistently, with clarity and courage. So if there is one thing you protect, it is your routine. Not because it is trendy, but because it is sacred. Because in a chaotic world, it is the structure that keeps you sane, the rhythm that keeps you aligned, the practice that keeps you grounded in what matters. Let others wake up and drift. You wake up and choose. Let others chase motivation. You build discipline. Let others talk about change. You live it, quietly, consistently, relentlessly. At the end of the day, growth is not magic. It is structure. It is effort repeated with purpose. And when you build your days with that kind of intention, you do not just outsmart others, you outgrow them. With grace, with strength, with peace. And that, in the Stoic life, is the greatest achievement of all. 11. Accurate self-belief. There is a kind of strength that lies not in arrogance, not in showmanship, but in honest self-assessment. To know yourself, truly, deeply, is to outmaneuver 90% of people who spend their lives guessing at their limits, bluffing their way through every room. You are not one of them. You don't overestimate your abilities, but you also don't shrink from what you are capable of. You walk with a grounded confidence, not because you believe you are perfect, but because you trust your ability to figure things out. You trust your resilience more than your image. You value progress more than pride. You've been tested, and your confidence isn't built on blind optimism or inflated belief. It's built on evidence. You've faced situations that demanded clarity, pressure that demanded calm, problems that demanded growth. And each time you met the challenge not by pretending to be more than you are, but by expanding to meet the moment. That is why you do not suffer from imposter syndrome, because you are not performing, you are practicing, you are improving, you are earning it every single day. The Stoics would call this proper pride, not boastfulness, not bravado, but a measured belief in your competence, backed by disciplined action and tested through results. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one." You have adopted that mindset. You don't talk endlessly about what you might do. You take action. And from that action, you build the clearest and most unshakable form of confidence, competence. This doesn't mean you expect yourself to always get things right. In fact, you embrace being wrong. You welcome correction. You view failure not as humiliation, but as information. Because the moment you realize you were off course, you gain the data to adjust. And with every recalibration, you sharpen your thinking. You refine your process. You get closer to the truth. This humility is not a weakness. It is what allows you to stay fluid, to adapt, to rise. When faced with a new challenge, you don't panic. You don't bluff your way through. You lean in. You say, "I may not know how to solve this yet, but I will." And that "yet" is everything. It signals that your mind is open, that your spirit is willing, that you are not here to avoid pressure, but to evolve under it. You don't chase perfection. You chase understanding. You don't argue to be right. You assess to be effective. And you certainly don't waste time engaging with people who are committed to misunderstanding. You've learned that arguing with fools only lowers your own clarity. You've internalized the ancient truth that from a distance, a pointless argument makes both people look like equals in foolishness. So you walk away, not because you are weak, but because your peace is not up for auction, your energy is not for rent, your time is not for waste. You know how to assess a situation. You know when to lean in, when to push, when to challenge the process. But you also know when to exit, elegantly, without fanfare, without drama. There is a mastery in that, because not every room deserves your presence. Not every conversation deserves your voice. You have nothing to prove. You have everything to preserve. And what you are preserving is precious. Your mental clarity, your emotional discipline, your capacity to grow. These are not things you gamble in public debates or empty power games. These are assets you guard because they fuel your ability to make an impact. While others waste their days posturing, defending, performing, you are refining, you are learning, you are building. You have outgrown the need to be impressive. You are focused on being effective, and that effectiveness comes from a deep self-knowledge. You are not the type to fake it until you make it. You are the type to study it until you understand it, to build it until you own it, to live it until no one can deny it. That is the kind of quiet power that does not need to overstate itself, because its presence is undeniable. People around you begin to notice it. They sense it, not in your words, but in your results. In the way you stay calm when others panic, in the way you ask better questions, in the way you admit what you don't know without losing your footing. That kind of composure, that refusal to bluff, that calm in the face of uncertainty, it is rare, and it is magnetic. So when others feel the need to overinflate, to prove, to dominate conversations with noise, you remain composed, because you know what matters is not who speaks loudest, but who adjusts fastest. Not who looks smartest, but who learns fastest. And you, by choosing humility over ego, growth over image, data over delusion, you always win the long game. This is what Stoic intelligence looks like in real time. It is not a fixed body of knowledge. It is a living relationship with truth. It is the ability to say, here is where I am now, here is what I am working on, here is what I know, and here is what I don't. There is no shame in that. There is only progress. Let others pretend, you will prepare. Let others speak of brilliance, you will build it. Let others chase applause, you will chase accuracy, because at the end of the day, you are not here to look capable. You are here to be capable. And the difference is everything. When you know your limits, you can push past them. When you acknowledge your ignorance, you can learn. When you stop pretending to be perfect, you become powerful. And that is the wisdom that puts you ahead of the rest. Stay honest. Stay accurate. Stay growing. That is the mindset that outsmarts not just other people, but the old version of yourself. And that, in the Stoic life, is the only opponent that truly matters. 12. Emotional composure under pressure. There is no greater display of strength than the ability to remain calm when the world around you is trying to pull you apart, to walk into chaos and carry stillness. To be surrounded by provocation, by noise, by challenge, and yet remain untouched, that is not coldness, that is command, that is not suppression, that is sovereignty. The one who cannot be moved by every insult, every challenge, every shift in mood from the people around them is the one who has already mastered the inner battlefield. You are this kind of person. You are not easily triggered. You do not hand over your peace to strangers. You do not respond to every emotional push like a puppet pulled by invisible strings. Because your mind is not reactive, it is trained, grounded, disciplined. This kind of control does not appear out of nowhere. It is earned through fire. It is sculpted in silence. It is forged every time you choose not to retaliate, every time you choose to pause instead of explode, every time you decide to see clearly rather than react blindly. The Stoics taught that you cannot control what others do, only how you respond. That lesson is the foundation of emotional composure. You no longer waste your energy trying to change people's minds, prove your worth, or silence critics. You do not flinch when someone raises their voice. You do not tremble when situations get tense. You do not collapse when plans fall apart. Why? Because you have something they do not. You have perspective. You see the moment for what it is, not a crisis, not an attack, but an opportunity to practice, to test your training, to apply what you know. Every challenge becomes a mirror, a chance to see yourself more clearly. Are you in control, or are you still controlled by emotion? The one who outsmarts everyone else does not just know more facts. They feel less fear. They are not numb, but they are no longer owned by every rising impulse. That is the edge. That is the strength others feel when you walk into a room and remain unshaken while everyone else scrambles. Think of the leader who stays calm in the boardroom while others panic. Think of the parent who speaks gently even when their child screams. Think of the warrior who remains steady before battle. These are not performances. They are practices, and you have made it your practice to choose composure no matter what the world throws your way. People will try to provoke you, some consciously, some unconsciously. They will test your boundaries, mock your values, disrespect your time, but none of it lands unless you let it. They can throw stones, but unless you choose to pick them up, they do not become your burden. This is the power of detachment, not the kind that disconnects from life, but the kind that refuses to be a slave to it. The kind of detachment that looks chaos in the face and says, "You do not move me." You have learned this through experience. You've had moments when your anger got the best of you, when your anxiety robbed you of clarity, when your pride pulled you into arguments that left you drained. But those moments taught you. They became your teachers. They revealed what still needed to be strengthened. And instead of defending your weaknesses, you chose to grow. You trained your mind to pause. You learned to breathe when others shout. You built the habit of asking, "Is this worth my peace?" And because of that, your life changed. Your presence changed. You walk through the world now not looking to win battles, but to maintain your center. You do not take the bait. You do not entertain every insult. You do not give others the satisfaction of seeing you rattled, because you are not here to react. You are here to lead, to live, to move with purpose. There is a scene in every great story when the hero is tested, not through a physical fight, but through emotional chaos, an ambush of words, a betrayal, a moment of loss or public embarrassment. And the true hero does not rage. They breathe, they take the hit and stay standing. That is the moment that defines them. That is the moment that defines you. Your life is too valuable to let it be shaped by the opinions or moods of others. You have too much to build, too much to learn, too much to offer to waste your time getting triggered by nonsense. The Stoics called this inner fortress the citadel of the soul. It is a place no one can enter unless you open the gates. And you have stopped opening those gates for anyone who does not earn their way in. So now, when you feel the rise of heat in your chest, you recognize it. You do not fight it. You observe it. You sit with it. You ask, "What is this teaching me?" And often, the lesson is simple. You are still growing. You are still in training, and every situation is a new round of practice. You are not perfect, but you are present, and presence is the most powerful tool you have. Let others waste their energy on reactions. You will protect yours. Let others escalate. You will de-escalate. Let others yell to feel strong. You will speak with clarity, and let that be your power. Let others try to dominate. You will master yourself, and that mastery will radiate. It will speak for itself. It will inspire. It will protect you. At the end of the day, emotional composure is not about appearing calm. It is about being calm. It is about building a mind that cannot be hijacked by every provocation. It is about becoming so rooted in your values, so committed to your peace, that nothing outside of you can break what you have built inside. And that, in the end, is the mark of someone who outsmarts not just the noise of the world, but the storms within. That is the power that sets you apart. That is the strength that makes you untouchable. 13. Holistic problem-solving skills. Some people are intelligent in pockets. They know one subject deeply. They can quote facts, recall data, repeat theories, and yet, when the variables shift, when life throws a problem outside the boundaries of that one domain, they falter. Because they are not thinking with structure. They are not thinking with systems. They are not solving. they are memorizing. But you are different. You are process smart. You see the landscape, not just the landmarks. You look at problems not as isolated events, but as patterns, systems, moving networks of cause and effect. You do not just study the surface. You trace problems back to their origin, deconstructing them piece by piece until you reach the root. Then, and only then, do you begin to rebuild. And when you do, you move with clarity. Not because you know all the answers, but because you understand how to think. This is the difference between intelligence and wisdom. Intelligence memorizes. Wisdom observes. Intelligence reacts. Wisdom deconstructs. You are a strategist, not just a technician. You look at complexity, and instead of panicking, you breathe deeper. Because problems are puzzles, and puzzles are patterns waiting to be seen. This way of thinking did not come from a textbook. It was built through experience, through trial and error, through asking better questions. You learned to zoom out before zooming in, to ask, what is the real problem here? What is the principle beneath the noise? This is what thinkers like Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus taught. They believed that every challenge was a layer of perception, a disguise wrapped around a simple truth. If you could strip away the assumptions, the expectations, the emotional fog, you could always get to the center. And once at the center, the path forward became clear. You have internalized this. You no longer panic when problems appear. You welcome them. Not because you enjoy difficulty, but because you trust your ability to navigate it. You break the problem down. You start at the first principle level. What do I know to be absolutely true? What can be removed from this situation? What is assumption versus what is fact? This kind of thinking is rare because it requires discipline. It requires patience. It requires the willingness to admit that your first impression may be wrong. You have developed frameworks, not just opinions. And that gives you an edge in every area of life. Whether in business, relationships, or personal growth, you don't just ask, what's happening? You ask, what system created this outcome? What process led to this moment? And how can it be redesigned at its foundation, not just patched at the surface? Think of the most successful people you admire. They do not just fix problems, they prevent them. They do not just fight fires, they study what caused the spark. That's what you do. You're not content with shortcuts. You want understanding, you want clarity, and that clarity comes from seeing all the pieces on the board at once. You're not overwhelmed by the complexity. You simplify it without losing depth. That is a rare skill. Others may solve one problem well. You solve problems at the root so they don't return, and this makes you indispensable. People may not always understand how you arrive at your solutions. They may think you are intuitive, but in truth, you are methodical. You have built your own internal playbook, and you apply it with consistency. There is a quiet confidence in that, because you don't just hope for things to go right. You design your way through uncertainty. You are not afraid of ambiguity because you know how to frame it. You do not get stuck in the details until you understand the structure. And once the structure is clear, the solution becomes inevitable. This mindset makes you a powerful collaborator. You don't dominate conversations. You ask questions that reframe the issue. You listen, not for agreement, but for insight. And then you bring all the threads together into a model that others can see and act on. You simplify the chaos. You connect the disconnected. And people feel smarter just by talking to you, not because you gave them answers, but because you taught them how to think. This is what Stoic intelligence looks like. It is not about being clever. It is about being clear. It is not about having all the facts. It is about knowing which facts matter. And most of all, it is about refusing to accept problems at face value. The Stoic does not say, "This is difficult, therefore I cannot do it." The Stoic says, "This is difficult, therefore I must understand it." And you have made that your practice. Let others be brilliant in fragments. You will be brilliant in structure. Let others recite what they read. You will apply what you've learned. Let others look smart. You will think smart, because at the end of the day, life does not reward memorization. It rewards adaptability. It rewards those who can walk into a new situation, map the system, understand the levers, and move things forward. That is what you do. You are a systems thinker, a puzzle solver, a person who sees the deeper mechanics behind what most people overlook. You have trained your mind not to react, but to construct, not to assume, but to clarify. And that is why you rise, not loudly, not suddenly, but inevitably. Stay with that discipline. Keep asking, what is the principle here? What is the root? What is the better way? And trust that by thinking at the foundational level, you will always build something stronger than those who chase quick fixes. Because the one who outsmarts the world is not the one with all the knowledge. It is the one who knows how to think when knowledge is not enough. That person will always find a way. That person is you. 14. Charisma. In diverse conversations. True intelligence is not just about knowing things. It is about knowing people. It is about knowing how to meet them where they are without ever lowering who you are. You are someone who understands this. You can move in many rooms, hold conversations on many levels, and speak in many tones, not to impress, not to perform, but because you know that if you want to carry ideas to the world, you must learn to deliver them in a voice the world can understand. You enjoy conversations with depth. You prefer dialogue that moves beneath the surface, that stretches the mind, that opens up new ways of seeing. But you are not pretentious about it. You are not the person who needs every conversation to turn into a philosophical debate. You know when to talk about the cosmos, and you know when a good laugh about ordinary life is what truly connects us. Because you understand that communication is not about showing how much you know. It is about building bridges. It is about meeting others with warmth and presence. This is where so many intellectually gifted people go wrong. They believe being smart is enough. They fall into the trap of believing that knowledge alone should earn them respect. But it does not. People remember how you made them feel, not just how much you knew. And you have cultivated something rare. You have paired intelligence with warmth, depth with lightness, precision with ease. You can make people laugh, not because you're trying to be a comedian, but because you are at peace with yourself. You can laugh at yourself because your self-worth is not fragile. You do not need to prove you are brilliant in every sentence. You are comfortable with being misunderstood. You are fine with not being the center of attention. And that quiet self-trust is what makes you magnetic. Charisma is not about performance. It is about presence. It is about being so attuned to the moment, so rooted in your own values that others feel safe enough to open up. And when they do, you listen, not to respond, but to understand, not to outshine, but to connect. That is charisma in its highest form, when people leave the conversation not just impressed by you, but elevated by the exchange. You've developed this over time. It didn't come from a script. It came from your willingness to be human, to not hide behind intellect, to bring your full self into every room. Your ideas, your discipline, your humor, your mistakes. You are not afraid to admit what you do not know, and that humility is what draws people in, because they feel that you are not competing with them. You are exploring with them. You can have conversations with thinkers and doers, with artists and analysts, with visionaries and pragmatists, because you are not bound to one identity. You are adaptable without being fake, fluid without being shapeless. You do not lose your values in conversation. You simply learn how to communicate them in a way that others can digest. That is wisdom in motion. It's why you never feel the need to dominate a discussion. You do not hijack conversations to prove your intelligence. You do not interrupt to assert your opinion. You wait. You ask thoughtful questions. And when you do speak, you do so with clarity. You know that silence can be more powerful than endless talking. That the right sentence, spoken at the right moment, lands harder than 1,000 loud ones. The Stoics understood this deeply. They did not teach us to withdraw from the world, but to move through it with mastery, with grace, with the ability to see clearly and speak wisely. They would tell you, speak only when it improves upon the silence. You have taken that to heart. Your words are chosen, your tone is measured, your curiosity is genuine. That makes your conversations feel rich. Whether the topic is the structure of the universe or last night's dinner, you do not isolate yourself with intellect. You expand your world with it. You do not dismiss people for not knowing what you know. You welcome them into the conversation. You simplify without being condescending. You listen without trying to convert. And because of that, people want to talk to you. They feel seen, respected, engaged. You remember that quote. Small minds discuss people. Average minds discuss events. Great minds discuss ideas. But you go further. You understand that all three, people, events, ideas, can be worthy of discussion if you approach them with the right intention. Talking about someone's experience is not shallow if you are learning from it. Talking about the news is not meaningless if you're connecting it to deeper values. Great minds know how to move between these layers, not because they are above them, but because they see the thread that runs through them all. That thread is human nature, and you have studied it in yourself, in others, in conversation, in silence. And that is what gives your communication its power. You are not a person who simply knows a lot. You are a person who brings people into what you know, who invites them to think with you, to laugh with you, to grow with you. So continue holding those deep conversations. Keep seeking out people who challenge you, inspire you, stretch you. But do not forget the power of lightness. The way a well-placed joke can unlock trust. The way humility disarms defensiveness. The way listening can say more than talking ever could. Let others chase validation. You will chase connection. Let others perform. You will be present. Let others try to dominate with information. You will lead with insight. Because at the end of the day, outsmarting the room isn't just about what you say. It's about how you make others feel in your presence. And when your intelligence walks hand in hand with your warmth, your curiosity, your humor, and your humility, you don't just shine, you draw people closer. And that, in the end, is the most powerful form of intelligence there is. 15. Multidimensional strategic thinking. There are two kinds of intelligence that few ever master. The first is linear foresight, the ability to see 5 moves ahead in a single game. The second is layered foresight, the ability to play 5 games at once and understand how each one affects the others. Most people never master either. Some become great tacticians, skilled at planning the next step, but overwhelmed when life throws multiple challenges at once. Others can juggle many things, but lack the clarity to think strategically about any of them. But you have trained your mind to do both. You have developed a way of thinking that is not reactive, not fragmented, but integrated, strategic, philosophical. You do not just ask what needs to be done now. You ask how your actions in one area ripple into every other part of your life. You think in systems, in interconnections, in long-term cycles. You understand that life is not a single arena. It is a network of arenas, each influencing the others: finance, health, intellect, emotions, relationships. These are not compartments, they are forces, and you have learned how to move through them not with stress, but with symmetry. You do not multitask in the shallow sense of trying to do 10 things at once. That is a distraction. That is a fast path to mediocrity. You engage in something deeper. You build momentum in one pillar of your life and then carry the momentum into others. You train your body to build discipline. That discipline sharpens your intellect. That intellect clarifies your emotional patterns. That emotional mastery improves your relationships. And those healthy relationships expand your network, your peace, your access to new opportunities. This is not magic. This is intentional alignment. Your thinking is not divided, it is layered. You can write a report while tracking a broader business vision. You can navigate a difficult conversation with emotional precision while also understanding the long-term impact that conversation will have on trust. You can save money today while envisioning the financial leverage it will grant you 5 years from now. This is not just intelligence, it is strategy with soul. It is the application of Stoic thought in real time, practical wisdom that refuses to separate the mind from action, thought from purpose. Marcus Aurelius ruled an empire while tending to his own mind. He understood that the strength of the state reflected the strength of the individual. You have learned this too. When your inner life is clean, your outer world sharpens. You do not wait for things to fall apart before rebalancing. You design balance from the start. You understand that all 5 domains, body, mind, wealth, connection, and emotion, are in constant motion. And your job is not to control each one obsessively. Your job is to direct the energy of each with clarity and trust. Most people burn out trying to do everything separately. You do not. You see the overlap. You eat well not just for health, but for mental clarity. You read not just to be informed, but to become articulate and persuasive. You invest not just to grow your wealth, but to reclaim your time. You rest not just to recover, but to think clearly, to love more deeply, to lead more wisely. This is holistic thinking. This is what makes you dangerous in the best possible way. You have moved beyond the illusion that one part of life must suffer for another to thrive. You know the truth, that it is possible to win across the board if you play the game with discipline, intention, and systems. This is what separates you from those who sprint without direction, those who chase without vision, those who rise in one area only to collapse in another. You are building a structure that can sustain success. A strategy that can hold peace. It is why you no longer react emotionally when one area of life feels strained. You do not spiral, you assess. You know how to shift the weight. You have lived long enough to see how emotional mismanagement bleeds into business, how poor physical habits weaken ambition, how unresolved relationships block mental clarity. And because you see all this, you remain ahead. Not because you are faster, but because you are thinking on a higher plane. This is what the Stoics meant when they spoke of philosophy as a guide for life, not just for argument. Strategic thinking is a form of wisdom. It is the refusal to live reactively. It is the strength to delay gratification, the humility to reassess, the clarity to focus on what matters most, even when everything is calling for your attention. Let others drown in scattered pursuits. You will move through complexity with coherence. Let others choose one area to succeed in while the rest collapses. You will build a life that holds strength in all directions. And you will do it not by doing more, but by thinking better. You are not chasing mastery in a vacuum. You are cultivating mastery in real life. You see how managing your finances grants you choices. You see how managing your emotions grants you stability. You see how managing your mind grants you freedom. And you weave them together like a strategist shaping an empire from within. This is the highest level of intelligence. To live in such a way that your thinking does not stay in your head, but becomes embedded in your habits, your relationships, your calendar, your results. You are not guessing anymore. You are engineering. Your life is not random. It is designed, not perfectly, but intelligently, courageously, with wisdom. So continue thinking this way. Keep seeing the threads others miss. Keep integrating your actions across domains. Because at the end of the day, the person who wins is not the one who knows the most, but the one who understands how everything connects. That person becomes unshakable, unstoppable, fully alive. And that person is you. The true measure of intelligence is not what you know, but what you create from what you know. It is whether you are shaping a life that reflects your deepest values or waiting endlessly for the perfect moment to begin. This is not a rehearsal. You are already in it. Every choice is a move. Every moment is a test. And if you truly carry that spark, now is the time to let it guide you. Your ideas mean nothing if you keep them locked away. Your gifts do not serve the world unless you have the courage to bring them to light. The greatest waste is not failure. It is never trying at all. So ask yourself honestly, what are you building with the mind you've been given? If this message stirred something in you, drop a comment below with the words, "Play smart." Let that be your quiet declaration. And if you found clarity in this, take a moment to subscribe, not for the sake of a number, but as a small promise to keep walking this path with intention. There's more to come, and you are meant